Welcome in, Minnesota United fans, to another edition of the Matchday Preview. Jonathan Harrison, you're joined once again by Manny Lagos. Manny, we've got a full show. It's an exciting show. Playoffs at hand. How are we doing this morning?
I mean, it must be a special day when we've got two such special guests right before the playoffs, right after decision day. I feel special. I feel really like, it's something unique is in the air for this show versus a lot of other shows.
People want to join us and talk about Minnesota United, Manny. It's a special time of year. It's a special feeling to have. We've been teasing it here. We are joined by Andy Greder and John Marthaler, who cover the team for various news outlets. So let's welcome them in. Andy, how are we doing?
I'm doing great. I sense a little bit of sarcasm in Manny, but I'm not really sure. And then also, we were at training last week, and Eric Ramsey came up and said, I heard on John Marthaler's podcast, which was reference to this. So I'm just lucky to be on John Marthaler's podcast.
We're all just lucky to be on John Marthaler's podcast.
I'd like to welcome all three of you to my podcast. It's good to have you guys here.
This is
I'm just excited that finally we've got two media guys here, and so Manny and Jonathan can't gang up on me like usual. This is going to be great.
Gang up
Andy's
on
got
you.
my back. Yeah, oh yeah. You guys are mean all the time. And now I got Andy. He's like the big brother who's gonna pound some heads now. This is gonna be good.
Sandwiches.
Yep, here we go.
I didn't realize, Jonathan, I didn't realize it was going to go down this way, but I guess we have to kind of, get ready.
I didn't realize
Here we go.
I didn't realize I was the one handing out the red cards. I never handed out a red card and banned you guys from the podcast. That was All right, we've got plenty to discuss. Loons in the playoffs, getting up to sixth place on decision day, a wild decision day, as it always is. So let's just start there. We'll get brief thoughts on finishing sixth and facing Real Salt Lake in the playoffs. We'll discuss more of that match later on, but just I want your brief thoughts to start off the podcast. Manny, I'll start with you, then Andy, then John, because this is John's podcast. He's got to have the last statement on
That's right.
on all topics. So Manny, I'll start with you. Brief synopsis and feelings about finishing sixth and facing Real Salt Lake in the first round.
Yeah, I'll tee it up. It was a really, really, really cool night at Allianz Field for pretty much every kind of participant, whether it was the fans. There was this amazing activation before the game. We had the calling. Our new Loons sculpture was on display where people were going to take pictures. Great music. Target did a great job kind of activating that space before the game, which was like an hour and a half before that just, I thought, built into some amazing energy. And once again, like, I don't know how this is in St. Paul in the Midway, but 20,000 people playing high-level soccer and cheering on soccer. And ultimately, the team didn't disappoint. It was a comprehensive performance that, and I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, but just led to probably the boring part of decision day. We weren't really involved in any of kind of the exciting stuff, but the fireworks really happened at the end of that Western Conference late night games or end of the game. So it was, just a great weekend. And really, I think for Minnesota United to kind of have the arc of starting so well and then dipping so kind of, quickly, and then just finishing so strong in sixth place in the conference. It really, I think, leads to an exciting kind of week here building up for this playoff and hopefully run, because that's how well we've been playing.
For sure. Andy?
Yeah, I thought it was great to see them continually play well, right? I think they scored a season high 4 goals and continued to be, pretty much lights out defensively. I know they gave up a goal, but very few chances that they had there. So I think it was impressive to see them, and probably a rightful reward that they were able to move up to sixth to get a better spot. I think, avoiding some of the top teams in the West is a benefit. And then I think one of the biggest things that I took away is I didn't realize it in the moment just because there was so much stuff going on with Minnesota United, but the role that Ethan Finley played in scoring his first goal of the year. His minutes have been cut in half. It looks like he might be done in Austin, but the way that he kind of respected the game and got an equalizer that really helped Minnesota move ahead of Colorado was, I thought, a interesting wrinkle for a guy that was born in Duluth and raised in Wisconsin and played for Minnesota for 4 years. That he was really helpful to the Loons moving up that one spot.
I think Ethan would even say too, scoring with his head was part of, like, nobody saw that either. Like, that is not usually a way that Ethan Finley scores goals.
Right. Yeah.
John?
Yeah, it's hard to say what's more unlikely, Austin scoring or Ethan Finley scoring. You know what I mean? Austin on the final day getting a result, that was a surprise. It was, we did sort of get Eric Ramsey to kind of sort of admit it, but no player, no coach is ever going to say before the game who they want to play in the playoffs. Everybody's smarter than that. But I think that now that we're on the other side of it, pretty much everybody with Minnesota United is going to admit that they didn't really want to play LAFC in the first round. They didn't really want to play the Galaxy, and nobody in the entire state of Minnesota wanted to play Seattle in the first round. So just to try the experience of trying to write a story and follow the Minnesota game, but then we also were trying to follow all the other games, and Seattle was winning, and then all of a sudden Seattle got a draw. Real Salt Lake came back and got a win. And then, like you said, Manny, there was a goal right at the end of two goals right at the end of the Houston LA game, where it went from Minnesota was playing Real Salt Lake to Minnesota was playing Seattle, back to Minnesota was playing Real Salt Lake. It was kind of, it wasn't an exciting night from a decision day perspective in Allianz Field, like it's been the last few years, but it was exciting in terms of trying to figure out who they were going to play.
Yeah, I love how it ended too, John, just because going in, it probably was one of the least exciting decision days when, the West, all the teams that were in the playoffs are in the playoffs. The East was set at the top of the table, really, and there was just a couple, which ended up being some drama, obviously, with the Atlanta. But it felt like, oh, maybe this year, for the first time, decision day won't be that exciting. And then our game whistle ends, and I don't know about you guys, but we actually started obviously really now paying, actually probably about 5 minutes before the whistle blew, because we were up 4-1, watching, and the drama in the Houston and the Colorado Austin Galaxy and LAFC was through the roof. I mean, decision day did not disappoint, just for that 7 or 8 minutes where so many goals, so many kind of changes. The Galaxy, scoring to think that they're going to win the West, and the next thing you know, they don't win the West, and we're going from 7th to 5th to 6th within 7 minutes. It was exciting, really exciting.
Absolute roller coaster, as decision day should be. I mean, you guys talked about it. Not a whole lot of drama inside Allianz Field as to what the result would mean, but outside of it and watching across the Western Conference, always one of the best aspects of decision day is the chaos surrounding it. So we'll talk more about that in the Western Conference coming up. Want to start off with the Eastern Conference, since that started off the day on decision day. Inter Miami really just going for the points record. They do get it. Lionel Messi coming in as a substitute in the second half and just bossing that game. 3 goals for him in that one, in a 6-2 rout of New England Revolution to get the points record. But on decision day, it finishes up with Montreal and Atlanta in the wild card spots. We know the result of that game because it was played last night at time of recording. Atlanta moving on in penalty kicks. In Montreal, a drama-filled game there, Manny. But any surprises for you in the Eastern Conference based off of standings and how their bracket shakes out? Miami playing Atlanta in that first round series, Orlando, Charlotte, Cincinnati, New York City, and Columbus, Red Bull, New York. Any surprises in the Eastern Conference?
I think you highlighted, the Miami game did have drama. I mean, with New England going up a couple goals, and based on the fact that they had nothing to play for except for not allowing Miami to kind of break their season record points in the season. But ultimately for me, it was once again about the guy that I keep on trying to not bring up, and Messi. You got to understand, I grew up in the 80s. Diego Maradona was my hero, and I want to say the best player of all time because of that. And this Messi situation has just blown that out of the water time and time again. Pretty much for the last 15 years, but I can block it out. I can even block out, Diego's drug habits, drug issues. Be like, no, it was great. 80s was harder. The soccer was harder. They kicked people more. But then he gets to this country, and I'm like, yeah, but the legs are going to go. PSG was kind of chunky for him. And then he has a week where he goes and scores 3 goals for Argentina against Bolivia. and then comes in the game and within 9 seconds just blows my mind again. Like it's just, I don't know how to. It's unbelievable. We really are lucky to see kind of the best player of all time, not obviously in his prime, but still playing like it's got to be amazing for anybody who gets to see him play live and have the performance he had over the weekend. And then to get to see Suarez and him get to see him kind of carry Busquets probably for me. And then obviously Jordi Alba's just busy self still with this youthful Miami team. I mean, at the end of the day, they built a lot of young players around that older core. And Messi's just been unbelievable. I mean, it was a sight. That second half was just unbelievable performance by him.
What's the first round series in the East that you guys are going to be watching the most intently? Which one do you think is going to be the closest, Andy?
I don't have the bracket in front of me. What I can say about Miami is I was looking at Minnesota United's form since the end of Leagues Cup to see where they were when it came to other teams in MLS, and they're third best in points per game since the end of Leagues Cup, and Inter Miami is number 1 at 2.3. So they obviously set the points record, and they were surging to the finish line as well. So, I know in the show notes you got who's the favorite to get MLS Cup and why is it Columbus? Well, I'd say Inter Miami has an argument to be made there.
That's fair. John, who is your favorite and why is it Columbus? Since we're asking that question at this point now.
Well, at this point, I would say my favorite's got to be Atlanta in the East because everything has gone wrong for Atlanta this season in the sense that they were terrible and then they tried their darndest to give up on the season and they can't. They can't figure out how to give up on the season. They backed into the playoffs. They won on penalties last night. I assume they're going to beat Miami 2 games in a row and just keep it going. Like I don't know what's possible, but it seems like everything they try to do, including giving up, goes wrong this season.
I felt that like the league was just so happy last night. I mean, the penalty shootout, that Montreal goalie couldn't save anything. That game's going to Mercedes-Benz. Messi playing at Mercedes-Benz in the playoffs. Like it was just like set up for this Atlanta.
I'm sure the league office was sitting there going, would we rather see Messi playing in front of 70,000 people at Mercedes-Benz or in 6-degree weather in Montreal? Which would we rather see? I don't know.
Well, the question is, was Don Garber wearing a suit with Atlanta's skyline or was he wearing a suit with Montreal's skyline? That will tell us everything, won't it?
Well, yeah, now it's not even Garber. It's Infantino who's showing up on the sidelines. So
that's true.
Even one above
That's true.
Fair. We're just skipping Don Garber in total. We're just going straight to the head of FIFA in general. So let's go to the Western Conference. That one will have more impact on us. LAFC jumping Galaxy on the final day in essentially the final moments of decision day. That one surprised me a little bit because of everything that needed to happen for the Galaxy. But once again, LA Galaxy just not getting it done on decision day when they needed to in Houston, Manny. We talked about it last week and predicted essentially that would happen, that the Galaxy would struggle on decision day in Houston, and they do just that.
Yeah, I feel like, again, I don't have any real like data to back it up, but I feel like Houston is the Galaxy, like our Seattle.
Yeah.
Like I feel like when they go there, it's always a bad game. They don't play well and they lose. And, it was fascinating. Like I said, they had everything to play for. LAFC had to claw and scrape to get their 3 goals to kind of get ahead in the goal difference. And then you just thought, no, this is Galaxy's year. They're actually, they fought and battled and got a PK late, but they couldn't close the game out. It was fascinating. And LAFC still is in their head, but that's just a reality. And again, credit to Galaxy. What a great year. Their roster has really shifted to an offensive juggernaut. But at the end of the day, somehow LAFC said, no, you're not there yet. So it was fascinating. And Andy brought it up. On our end, at one point we were for sure playing one or the other, and that's what we thought we were heading to. And that Houston goal shifted us as well as the Austin goals.
Yeah, absolutely. Just wild stuff there. Vancouver playing Portland in Portland tonight, despite Vancouver being the 8th seed. Motocross derbies get in the way of wild card playoff games every once in a while when you schedule them at your stadium at this time of the year. But that's a different story.
That's all you're going to bring about it? Just casually mentioning that a team that makes the playoffs is not hosting their home game. That coach has got to be excited about that. I'm sure he's happy.
Oh, I'm sure there are plenty in that organization that are real happy that that was scheduled at this time of the year when they could have been hosting this game, which will surely play into it because Portland's always a tough place to play. And it'll certainly have an impact on how this game shakes out tonight at the time of recording. And so who's the favorite for you guys in the Western Conference? It feels like this one's a little bit trickier than the Eastern Conference where it's either Miami or Columbus. This one feels like there's a couple teams that could have a shout for favorite, Andy.
Yeah, I don't know if there is one clear-cut favorite just because of what we saw at the top of the table at playoff seeding time coming decision day. I think both LA teams are good. I think Seattle's been playing really well. You know, when I talked about the points per game since Leagues Cup, it's Inter Miami and then it's Seattle and then it's Minnesota. So Seattle's really come on strong and is playing well at the right time. So I think those three teams, to go back to Minnesota's matchup, I don't think Real Salt Lake is the same team as they were earlier on in the year. They're 10th in points per game since the end of Leagues Cup. You know, I think Andres Gomez leaving, I think hurts them. Obviously, Diego Luna is playing well, but Chicho Arango hasn't scored since July 7th, I think it is. So, you know, they're a 3 seed, but that's kind of in kind of number only. I don't think they're one of the favorites, really. I think it's wide open. I think it could be any number of, you know, top 4, 5, 6 teams.
John, who's your favorite in the West and why is it Columbus?
I think Columbus would do well in the West playoff bracket. So I assume at some point down Garber will move him over. I don't know. I mean, for me, LAFC is the clear favorite just because the Galaxy seem like they have feet of clay. You know what I mean? Like, well, they got a lot of good players up top, and then you look at their defense and you go, I don't know about this. And then LAFC, Seattle has been the best team in the West since June 1st, even going back past Leagues Cup. You look at the points per game, they've been the best team in the Western Conference since June 1st because they stopped getting somebody sent off in every single game they played, which they were doing in the spring. But Seattle can't beat LAFC. They've lost to them 4 times this year, which is impressive. And I do almost want to see that happen in the playoffs because I don't know if an MLS team has ever lost to another MLS team 5 different times in a year. And I think I would like to see that. But just because of Seattle's inability to beat LAFC, I would have to say LAFC is the favorite for sure.
And they'll shake out and they'll probably play each other in the semifinals, depending on how things in the first round play out. And first round will get going this weekend in the Western Conference. Minnesota playing Real Salt Lake next Tuesday. We'll get to that, but let's jump into this match. I know Andy's got a heart out here in a little bit, so I want to get his thoughts on the St. Louis game. 4-1 Minnesota United, a dominating performance, a really good performance from the Loons at just another, a good time to have it, Manny. And you couldn't have asked for a better way to close out the season than the way the Loons did.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great night. I think it was a great night because the game played out where we made it easy. Although I do think it's important that it was a tactically fascinating way we played. We hadn't played this way quite that often this year, where we really let St. Louis have the ball and dictate the tempo, and they didn't really dictate it. They didn't move the ball quickly, but we didn't really middle or even high press. We kind of just won the ball and then had chances to go forward, particularly after we scored. So I thought it was a great setup by the coaching staff and Eric in terms of how the lineup was and how we kind of navigated, particularly after the goal, saying, you know what, we're not going to get our full 4 goals by just going at them and waves of attacks. We're just going to kind of let the game play out and let them have the ball a little bit, but they're not going to go anywhere with it. And for me, it was tactically fascinating because St. Louis really struggled up until the second half. And I think Eric said, okay, you know, that's pretty much it. Now I'm going to put in 3 offensive players and an explosion of just now defending and counterattacking in kind of a 5-3-2. So it was a really fun, comprehensive win, but looking at it different than a lot of our games that we've had this year, where we really did not high press at all. And Eric really, you could tell, didn't want the game to ever open up. He's like, you know what? I want to win. And the best way to do that for tonight is probably just not allow the game to ever get wide open.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked the performance overall. But the big story coming out of the game, Andy, was the substitutions. You can't you can't talk about this game and not talk about the triple substitution of Songbin Jung, Franco Fragapane, and Tani Loloche coming in for Robin Lod, Kelvin Yeboah, and Joaquin Pereira, and having a near instant impact on that goal, the second goal of the game for Minnesota, just 4 or 5 minutes after they come on the field.
Yeah.
They all three combine on that second goal.
Yeah, I don't even think it was 4 or 5 minutes. It was probably more like 2 or 3 minutes. I think you could make the argument that Eric Ramsey has made substitutions pretty much at the hour mark almost regularly, and you could really look for that substitution earlier than the 70th minute, just given where, like Manny said, the field had kind of tilted up until that point. But yeah, I mean, absolutely kind of instantaneous impact of energy and pressing that Eric wanted to see out of them, and then to get 3 goals out of it after that was probably a kind of a master stroke of what he wanted to see, even if he was just looking for energy and pressing and to be able to get those goals really changed the game.
John, were you surprised with the 3 players that came off in Robin Lod, Kelvin Yeboah, and Joaquin Pereira, considering how they were playing early on in that match?
I wasn't surprised at all because the second half, St. Louis was the better team until the substitutions. You look at the first half of that half, the first half of the second half. Even Ramsey said after the game he felt like his team just sort of resigned themselves to defending for the rest of the game, to say, all right, we're going to see out this 1-0. Everybody's going to defend. And so as a coach, he decided to make a line change up front, put in the second power play unit instead of the first power play unit. And it worked out well. And you look at how well that sort of second unit played, and it seems like it's almost a threat. Like, all right, the guys who are out there to start with, which it seems pretty much said is going to be Loden, and it's going to be Pereira, and it's going to be Yeboah. But all right, guys, if you're not gonna get it done, then we're just gonna throw on the second line in the 55th minute next time. The 50th, we'll put them all on in halftime. You better score some goals.
Yeah, we'll talk about the standout performances from Robin Lod and Joaquin Pereira a little bit later on, but I do want to talk, Manny, about Songbin Jung. He had some incredible play when he came on, especially in his second goal of the game. An absolutely incredible goal for him. Started out taking the ball basically at inside his own half and dribbling through the entire St. Louis midfield and defense, laying the ball off to Tanny, and then making another incredible run onto the back post. And just a great pass from Tanny on that 4th goal for Minnesota.
Yeah, I like that you brought up Sangbin, and we're talking about the 3. I do want to kind of let the audience know there is a reality here that this is not like just putting 3 guys in and then it'll just get better, and that happens within the game. This is building up with the coaching staff, keeping guys hungry, getting guys feel like they're valued and ready to come on and commit. And really, the journey for Tani and Frag, I would say they've kind of been doing that pretty consistently. With that energy. And again, I bring up that there must be a lot of good work behind the scenes with the coaching staff, because Sangbin is still trying to navigate that role in terms of when he comes on, how do I make sure I'm good defensively, but still get forward and kind of use his superpower, which is he's crazy fast, very good technically. And for me, particularly the last goal was so exciting because you saw the relationship with Bongi in this, and then you just saw Sangbin's superpower. He is so fast. And when he's hungry to run like that, it's another great weapon going into these playoffs, which should get every fan excited. And everybody who's a soccer lover, the tempo and pace of that goal was world class. His ability to run with the ball, then his ability to play off and continue to run for 70 yards. And then Tani's just kind of selfless decision as a forward who probably could have showed Eric, you should be playing me. I want to score this. To decide to play that kind of pass where it's the tempo of Sangbin's run, outstanding. And I give a lot of credit to Fraga too. He came in, off the flick of Tani on the other goal and the pass to Sangbin. It was just a great kind of 3 guys hungry to play, hungry to contribute, hungry to be part of hopefully this journey in the playoffs.
Yeah, great regular season send-off for Franco Fragapane, who was honored by the club ahead of the match. Looks like it will be his final regular season match for the club. Andy, just a great display from him coming off the bench.
Yeah, for sure. I thought it was peculiar to announce roster decisions in the last regular season game with a decision day in the playoffs yet to come. Obviously, those conversations might have been had behind the scenes, but to kind of have the discipline and professionalism to still come on and give everything that he has to the club, I thought was, really impressive, knowing that he doesn't have a future here. And that being kind of made public, I thought was was interesting and kind of peculiar, kind of odd timing to see that. Manny, the way that you talk about Song Bin, it makes you think that he should be a winger. It sounds like he should be an attacking player and maybe not so much of a wing back. It seems like he's really kind of, like you said, his kind of ability to change the game with his pace maybe deserves to be in an attacking spot, in my opinion.
I would say a little bit of both. I would say my viewpoint is he's still really young and he's still growing into what he really wants his qualities as a starter to be and his qualities as a sub to be. I certainly think he plays the role the same as Song Bin or Bongi does, where right now Bongi is, at times a right wing back. But if we play really well, which I don't think we'll play the same way we did against St. Louis, we're going to have Bongi contribute offensively. And Sang Bin and Bongi are very similar. They're so honest defensively in that position. And then how can we get our numbers higher up the field where now he does become a right winger versus a right wing back, essentially like Saka for the plays for Arsenal. You don't look at him as an outside back. You really look at him as a winger. And so I would say I really just have been really impressed with the staff's management of him to help him grow into the nuances at such a young age. It's really a lot to ask somebody that young to be so good defensively and offensively as that right wing back. So you're right. It's probably a more preferred position. But ultimately, for me, the goal, I think, is to kind of develop him to be a weapon, both as a starter and on the bench. And to me, I get excited because I hadn't seen him come to games over the last month and have that type of energy yet. And maybe that's because he's kind of coming more as a right wing back. But either way, I think if he comes as a wing back in the playoffs, I think he'll realize I can run, I can get forward. And really, it was exciting to see that kind of just energy from him. And again, to give the crowd a send off in the regular season with that type of goal at the end of the game, it was so fun. It was so fun to see him be the one to contribute and show his qualities where he hadn't been really able to do it the second half of the season very much.
Now, you mentioned getting forward from that right wing back spot, and we saw Bongi do that time and time again on Saturday night. And I just got to ask, Manny, how many miles did Bongi run? Because he was popping up in dangerous offensive positions. And then literally it feels like a couple seconds later, he was popping up in key defensive spots, taking away balls and stopping counterattacks from St. Louis. He was incredible from that right wing back spot, just getting up and down the field and being where the team needed him to be.
Yeah, I just love his defensive work rate's outstanding. I mean, I know they're the offensive side, but just for him to kind of get back and manage that weak side and make sure he's tucking in and making sure he's then closing and getting the pressure, it was outstanding. I mean, he really has embraced that role right now, and it probably lessens his offensive qualities that he probably feels like he could contribute. But at the same time, it really is cool that you bring it up because a lot of times that defensive work goes unnoticed. I was talking to my dad about it, and he gets so excited when he sees that kind of commitment defensively.
Yeah, he was awesome defensively. On the offensive side, on his side of the field, starting the game, Robin Lod scoring a goal in the 21st minute. Excellent through pass from Kelvin Yeboah, John. But absolutely gorgeous. And does his goal and the way he played on Saturday night solidify his chances of winning the comeback player of the year, John?
I don't know. The people I see that have been talking about their votes online, I haven't honestly seen a lot of people talking about Robin Lod, which seems crazy to me. Like
flyover country, John, flyover country.
Yeah, I guess it must be flyover country. I mean, people are talking about like Ian Frey for Miami. Great story. He's torn his ACL 19 times or whatever, and he came back and played some games. And that's great. But he playing 15 games in a season, and then you've got a guy who's got 8 goals and 14 assists this year or whatever, coming back from a season-long injury, all-star this year. Maybe I'm confused about what criteria we're supposed to be using for the comeback player of the year award voting. Like, is it the best player who's on the list, or is it the guy who overcame the most? Some people seem to be thinking of, all right, who's the guy who overcame the most rather than who is the best player on this list? Because if you look at, I mean, you don't even need to use the eye test. You just look at the numbers. It's Robin Lod, and there's no comparison. But then again, I saw somebody who said, they were voting for Lewis Morgan, and that seems crazy to me. Like, if you're going to vote for Lewis Morgan, why would you not vote for Lod instead? I don't know. This is a message to all of the East Coast and West Coast listeners out there of the Sound of the Loons podcast. I know you're out there, and you already had to submit your award votes, so this can't affect anything. But in conclusion, flyover country sucks.
I think it's got to be a combination, right? I think it's got to be the most compelling story and the best player that comes of it, right? I think if you tear your meniscus, is that as compelling as, like you said, tearing your ACL multiple times, right? I mean, you still
Yeah.
both lose the season, right? So I think that's the biggest thing is you have a knee injury and you come back and perform at a high level. I think Robin certainly performed at a higher level. So I think it's probably a combination of what's the most compelling story and who's the best player that comes out of it. I think that's probably that kind of needle that you need to thread.
So what Minnesota should have done, and I'm not saying, we can't go back in the past, but when he was out for the season with a knee injury, they should have run him over with a steamroller of some kind. And then he could have come back from that, and it would have been a much more compelling story.
Just throw all the three-letter ligaments in there, PCL,
Yep.
MCL, ACL. Just say that, it was everything.
Hire someone to hit your injured players with a car. That's what I'm saying, MLS.
I don't really know how to smoothly transition out of
No, there's no
naming
way.
your own player.
Maim your own players
I think
for
you go back to
awards
the goal.
purposes.
I thought that first goal was just, it was coming. We sat a little bit deeper, but every time we won the ball, you mentioned it, Pereira got in good spots. Joe got to the end line quick, especially on that left side. And Yeboah's movement was great. And to your point, it was just the timing of it, the tempo of it. The goals were really good on Saturday, really good. And that first one really just inspired the stadium. It also was important because I think there was a time where St. Louis is like, okay, we're going to stay in this game and then see if we can sneak something. And I think scoring that really kind of started them to think about vacation, which made the game a little bit kind of easier for us to make sure we navigate and win.
I thought there was an interesting thing. I asked Eric Ramsey yesterday about Yeboah's pass and kind of obviously it was gorgeous, like you said, Manny. I think one thing that Eric mentioned is that he's going to need to do more of that in the playoffs because of the attention that Yeboah is facing. And Eric said that he sent Yeboah a clip of the defense kind of converging on him and him needing to make quick decisions and keep the ball moving. And I think that's something to look forward to of kind of what they're going to need out of Yeboah. It's going to be passing as well as scoring when they go into the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how his role develops in the playoffs because, as we know, playoff season kind of changes the way soccer is played. It just the way soccer is played in the playoffs changes from what it is in the regular season. Midfield for Minnesota, Trapp and Dotson once again coming up with a big game. But I think another overarching story of this final run-in is the defensive play from Minnesota United. They gave up the goal in the second half, which made it 480 minutes without giving up a goal. And you can't ask for having that kind of defensive solidity going into the playoffs when we know defense plays a big role in how teams advance is incredible to have at this time of the year, Manny.
Yeah, it really is. It starts with Dane's leadership and just he seems locked in. Movement for him, and particularly kind of when he really sees the game well, reads it really well. And then you got that back three of Harvey, Diaz, and Boxall, just outstanding box defending, their composure, their athleticism. And Sonny and Will, Sonny's been beast mode in terms of getting around the field and battling, and Will's just been that great leader where he's kind of combined his year of experience and his crazy fitness, which has really allowed that kind of middle of the game. And I really liked how Loden Pereira, to me, it's essentially kind of like a 3-4-2-1 a little bit, how we're playing right now, where it's kind of a Sonny and Trapp battle in the middle, and then you've got Loden Pereira a little bit more free above them, and then you're up top, and then you've got the wing backs of Joseph and Bongi. It just seems to work defensively. We look good, and now it just starts to open up even more offensive kind of patterns, which again, it just seems exciting for the playoffs. Like I said, the way we're playing defensively, the way we kind of are starting to open up offensively, it's a great time of the year to kind of have this type of structure and balance in the group.
The Audi 2024 MLS Cup playoffs are here, and your Loons are ready to fight for the title. It all starts with a 3-game series against Real Salt Lake, and given the form of these two teams, we're set for some exciting soccer. Game 2 is coming to Allianz Field on Saturday, November 2nd. Get your tickets now at SeatGeek.com to make sure you don't miss out on this postseason action. Absolutely. I know, Andy, you got to get going here shortly. I do want to use this to transition into talking about the Real Salt Lake game, because you got the quote, I think, of the series already from Dane St. Clair yesterday, talking about, I believe it was Dane St. Clair. Yeah, Dane St. Clair talking about Brian Vera and how that storyline will be hanging over this entire series.
Yeah, so it was actually John's question, so credit to John for bringing that
That's right,
up.
Jonathan. Thanks a
Sorry,
lot.
excuse me.
This
He's the one who tweeted it, so he's
this is John
tweeted it.
Marthaler's podcast. We got to bow down to Marthaler here. Yeah, so obviously Dane is not one to mince words when it comes to things like this, and he said it's not the Brian Pereira spitting at Michael Boxall on October 2nd isn't in the back of his mind, it's in the front of his mind. And that he takes, joy in kind of ending their season. And that's the most talking you can do. I'm kind of paraphrasing. I don't have it in front of me, but he went on and on and on and on. I could have kept adding a few threads to that quote. He did not stop there either. I think it's something that's very important to him and to the team because of the standing that Boxy has within this group. And also the fact that, and Dane mentioned this yesterday too, is the fact that it wasn't really known in the moment what happened. Right. I think they didn't know that he had spit on him or spit towards him. And that came out in the review process. And I think if it would have been known earlier, it would have had a harsher reaction in the moment. I think, it'll be important to kind of channel that thing during the game, right. To not let it bubble over and impact their potential when they play in St. Paul in game 2. Obviously, Pereira's going to be suspended for game 1, so it's not going to be a storyline there. I wonder what fans are going to do when Paris steps on the field at Allianz Field if he does play in that game in game 2. It just kind of has a really juicy angle for, no pun intended there. Hey.
No, the funniest thing about
a real slobber knock.
Slobber knock. The funniest thing about that St. Clair quote was the more he talked, the more you just got the sense that he was regretful he didn't sprint 90 yards down the field and punch somebody in the face. Like it really sort of boiled down to, once I found out what happened, I really regretted not going down there and getting sent off for
this. It would have been. It's like when your wife's pregnant, you can speed to the hospital, and you find out you don't, like, because Dane loves doing that sprint, and this was the one time would have been so justified. Like. Right. And he wasted a moment to speed to the hospital.
Anyway, if Dane St. Clair doesn't get sent off in any of these 2 or 3 games, it's going to be a minor miracle.
Let's hope there's no red cards.
I will say it's nice that you guys got those. It's a great quote by Dane. Great stuff, guys. And I also think I just remind the viewers that to me, this is a great matchup and just it's so raw because we just played them. And the reason why that spitting happened was how well we played, particularly defensively in RSL, that it just built up and bubbled for them to kind of lash out that way. So again, I'm looking forward to hopefully a similar type of outing defensively. I think we can be a little bit more aggressive offensively in this one. I think we're at a different place than we were when we played there last time. I think we were kind of looking for the point, whereas I think we actually can go there and still play well defensively, but get after them more offensively than we did last game. And I think that's why that incident happened. I think RSL really ran out of ideas how to break us down and try to create some drama to see if that could help.
Yeah, we'll talk more about this match as we go along, but I know, Andy, you got to leave. So I want to let you get your thoughts on this match and how the Loons set up against Real Salt Lake and how they match up.
I think it's, like I said earlier in the podcast, I think it's a really good matchup. I don't think offensively they're the same type of team. And I think Minnesota United's defense has been, like we talked about, with a 480-minute shutout streak is really on its game right now. So I think that it's a great matchup. I just want to thank you guys for having me on John's podcast. So
you're welcome. Thanks for being.
All right. See you guys.
All right. See you, Danny. All right, we'll continue the discussion here about this matchup. I'm really excited for this one, Manny and John. As Andy said, this one sets up really well for Minnesota. When we went in decision day, I know you don't always want to pick out the opponent and say, hey, I want this team because they're not playing well. But when you looked at the opponents in the Western Conference that Minnesota could have had, you looked at some of these other teams in Seattle and the 2 LA teams, you're like, I don't want any of those teams based off how they're playing. And you're kind of looking at Real Salt Lake and seeing the recent form against Real Salt Lake between these two teams hasn't been a proper result. Neither team has won a game in this series since August of 2022. It's been dead even between these two sides. Minnesota are 0-5-2 in Utah, and we've seen already this season them take a couple of results in places they haven't gotten results before. So what better time to do it than in the playoffs, Manny?
Yeah, I mean, my brain is going to just how Eric's going to navigate such a long window between when we played Saturday to a week next Tuesday. And just I do think the John and Andy's of the world on John's show right now
now comes the ganging up again.
Yeah, he's gone.
Andy's
this
gone,
is what
so
I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Andy's gone, and now the shots come out. All right, go ahead.
For sure. No, but I think this will be the pick of all the pundits. So I bring that up because it's going to be interesting to see how Eric continues to have the guys focused and understand the game itself is going to be whether we win or lose and not what people say or the pundits pick. But I do think the momentum of looking at the other matchups in the West, I think ours will be the upset du jour to pick. And again, that's a credit to us. That's a credit to, I think we're one of the teams that nobody wants to play right now. But it's going to be important that we build a great week of training and build up the guys really being focused on doing what they did well in RSL last time, but even better, versus like, this is going to be easy. It's a great matchup. We should do well. And that's going to be a huge challenge because, like I said, I think there's going to be a lot of media going into this being the upset of the first round.
John, what's your expectation for Minnesota at Real Salt Lake in the first round in this multi-game series between these two teams?
Given how the last game went, it just feels like it's going to be a total rock fight. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like it's going to be one of those series where it's like 5-3 in game one and 6-4 in game two. It feels like there's going to be more red cards than goals. Real Salt Lake's best player is Chicho Arango, who's a great player, but he hasn't scored in a couple of months. And let's just say his gamesmanship is also a all-star level. And so it feels like it's going to be two teams that are sort of circling around, seeing if they can get the other team to punch them first a little bit. So my prediction is more red cards than goals in at least one of these games.
I like it. I like the chaos that John's bringing to this. Chicho Arango, as you guys have said, hasn't scored since July 6th. According to FBref, he's only got 2.0 expected goals in that time that he's developed or produced himself. So the goals aren't coming, and he hasn't really been playing up front that well. And they certainly are missing a couple of pieces. Diego Luna, though, 3 goals in his last 5 games. He certainly presents a tricky opponent to kind of shut down, Manny. But this is going to be an interesting one, not just because it's two teams that have played each other quite a bit in the Western Conference, but this is a series you don't really see that too often anymore. How do things change, and how do you manage that? What are the keys to managing a series instead of just a one-game playoff game?
Yeah, just to go back to the Arango, I think we had the goal drought basically since Gomez left. I don't think he scored. Yep. Who was an amazing player, and I think that was, that's a big decision by them to sell a player mid-season. There's got to be a little weight on their shoulders thinking that, we can do this and we have enough either in the transfer window or on our bench that we can still compete and win. And I think right now it feels like they've dipped a little bit, and Arango has dipped. It's official now that, since he's gone there, not only has he not scored, the chances have dried up. So Diego Luna, to me, if you're on, on a neutral side, I love watching the kid. He doesn't look like a soccer player. He doesn't look like he is going to be fast, skilled, should be on the field at all. And he really is such a uniquely different looking and different playing player. And he's very dangerous too. So there's two sides of it. Personally, love watching him play. Just everything about him, the youthful energy, the kind of quickness and explosiveness, not like aerobically over the whole game, but just in spurts where the skill is through the roof. He's somebody that we're going to have to really watch. He really now kind of has taken over their team creatively. And he to me is their biggest danger man on the field. Ojeda is their guy that I really think is good too in the midfield. He's had good games against us. He can go physical. He can move the ball well. I remember Anderson Julio off the bench is another speedy guy that has done well against us. So I just think for us, it's really, and I think their goalkeeping situation is interesting where I don't think it's a strength of their team. I do like Glad. Glad's a good experienced MLS player that, kind of sets the leadership back there. But see, it feels to me like it's one of those games where if we kind of get after in the right way and keep our structure defensively, we should find ourselves having chances in that first game. And with it going straight to a shootout, I think that's a good chance to have a lot of opportunities to win that first game on the road for sure.
Yeah, I'm really excited for how this plays out in game one. We talked about the spitting incident and how that plays into it. John, what's the key to not letting that boil over? Obviously that'll come into major effect in the second game when he's allowed to play again, and that'll be at Allianz Field, which will certainly be an interesting reception from Minnesota United fans. But how do you not let that boil over and take over the whole match instead of focusing on what you're supposed to be doing and scoring goals instead of focusing on trying to get one back against the guy who spit at your team leader?
I mean, I do think Minnesota United, some of the team leaders like Dane St. Clair, like Michael Boxall, are, I wouldn't say hotheads exactly, but they certainly are susceptible in the moment to moments of forgetting that they need to win on the field rather than win in the brawl. And
Would you throw
the funny thing is,
too, John? Would you throw Joseph in there as well, maybe?
I think he's ready. I think he's an underrated factor in those times of, like, you look at
one.
when you look at who the third guy is going to be in, who the real wild card is? Carlos Harvey is the real wild card in those moments. Like, there is no telling if you've got like Michael Boxall in a confrontation, it's the second guy in is going to be Dane St. Clair, but the third guy in who might come flying in like with a karate kick, that's Carlos Harvey for sure. And then Rosales is sort of fourth place. But the funny thing is, looking at Michael Boxall, he got sent off in the League's Cup last year. And at the time, it was like, all right, let's look up when this guy was last sent off. He had never been sent off in his professional career before that game. It's just the way he plays and the look on his face at all times. It was unbelievable to me that he'd never had a red card before that. So he certainly has he has developed the skill over the years of the guy who's been able to just stay on the right side of the line. You know what I mean? Like, no guy has pushed over more opposing players without getting a yellow card in MLS this season. Playoffs is always heightened emotion and heightened times where it's like Dane St. Clair said. He said the best thing you can do is beat him on the field. And it's hard to remember that when a guy is pushing one of your teammates. So Minnesota's gonna have to keep a lid on it.
All right. I'll ask you both this. Who's the most important player from Minnesota United in this series? Manny, I'll start with you, and then John, you next.
There's no way I'm answering that.
Come on.
No way. It's the group for sure. This is the playoffs. This is me kind of channeling years of playing and coaching, and like it's the collective. I can't, my coaching and other side, I can't even get to an individual side for this one. No, listen, I would say the collective group and our bench are all equally important to navigate all of these games. So,
all right, John, it's your podcast. You have to come out with the bold statements.
Nope. So. All right, here's my pick. My pick is going to be Joaquin Pereira because we sort of talked about, and Andy mentioned this, we sort of talked about how other teams are swarming Kelvin Yeboah a little bit. And obviously Robin Lod is also a known quantity in terms of, if you're Real Salt Lake, thinking about which players do we need to hold on to, which players do we need to control. And Minnesota has shown all year that they're perfectly comfortable. They're perfectly comfortable. And indeed, what they want to do is try to control the game without the ball. And so there's going to be a lot of moments where there'll be transition moments where Minnesota's going to have to go forward and try to find something, whether it's on the break or whether it's playing against numbers that are getting back at the same time. And so you sort of look at who's going to be that creator, and whether it's Yeboah or Lod, who are sort of the known quantities, can Pereira be that third guy that is the third option? It's a little bit like the NBA, where you look and you see defenses that are trying to take away the top two options. Who can be that third guy? In this game, I think it's going to be Pereira. Can he be that third guy that can create something offensively for Minnesota?
I like it. So flipping the card over then to Real Salt Lake, we've talked about some of their struggles up top. with Chicho Arango, Diego Luna playing pretty well this season. Is Diego Luna the answer to this question for Real Salt Lake, Manny and John, or is it someone else?
I, it's kind of funny what Manny said about Diego Luna, just that he's aesthetically not the picture of what you imagine a soccer player to be. And I feel like fans love those guys way more. Like you look at a guy like Cristiano Ronaldo, just looking at him, knowing nothing about him, even if you didn't know he's a soccer player, you'd be like, yeah, the midpoint for this guy is 35 international goals. Like anything less than that would be a disappointment. And I don't even know if he's a soccer player. Just look at him. And then on the flip side, you got a guy like Messi, where you look at him and you go, is he okay? Like, he's okay. Like there's nothing actually wrong with him. So then it makes it even more amazing that he's the best player in soccer history. And I feel like Diego Luna is a little bit in that category where you look at him and you go, he's playing tonight, right? Like he's definitely one of the players. He's not just, yeah, he's one of the players, and then he's an amazing player. So I think Diego Luna is sort of the wild card.
Manny?
Yeah, it's Diego Luna.
Okay.
I mean, if we're talking wild card, I think you phrased the question differently for me. I do think Joseph, Bongi, and Pereira, along with Asani in there, are all probably more offensive options than we've had earlier in the year, where I think they can contribute in a way that the group's structure and balance has played into. We now have a lot of guys that contribute on both sides of the ball, which I think is exciting. So it goes to my collective spirit, but individually, I feel like there's a lot of different numbers to get forward now and have chances. So, and then obviously set pieces are always big in playoffs. Don't forget that as well. And I don't know how we stack up in set pieces versus RSL. My gut is we're probably a little bit better than them on both the offense and defensive side. But I do think for them, Luna, Julio's speed off the bench sometimes worries me. And then eventually Arango is got the data that he should be scoring eventually every game he doesn't. So that always makes me nervous if he's gone, 13, 14 games out scoring. It's a little bit like the law of averages would probably St. Louis was going to get a goal this weekend based on it's really hard to go that many games with a shutout.
For sure.
I will also say on the Minnesota side, I said this in the press box on Saturday, and so I want to say it publicly here too. My gut feeling prediction is that somehow Timu Pukki will have a big role to play in the playoffs for Minnesota. I don't know how it's going to happen exactly, but that's just my gut feeling.
We're getting a playoff Pookie party?
Playoff Pookie. I don't know what it's going to look like. I mean,
that's a
maybe
lot
he'll
of
just
alliteration right there. 3P. There you go.
if you're on the call again, Jonathan, and Pookie scores a late goal, that's what you got to say. That's the thing. Even if you're not on the call as the color guy, you got to be the one that yells that out.
Oh, we've got Zarek. We've got Zarek for that. I'll tell Dan that he has to drop in playoff Pookie party if it happens or when it happens, because this is John's podcast. It will happen because that's what he's saying. So,
hey John, I did bring up set pieces. I do think thinking about it, particularly when you're throwing balls in the box. I think that area they've been a little more inconsistent this year in the goalkeeper spot. Whether they go with the young kid, I think they're probably going to go with McMath probably, but I don't think he's had a strong year. So I think that's an area that we can really get at him, is really putting pressure on him with some good set pieces, and really hopefully that leads to waves of attacks, not just the set piece itself, but when we repurpose possession again. So I think that, like I said, I think that's an area where Salt Lake has tried a couple different options and it hasn't quite hit for them.
All right, time for some playoff predictions. We'll stay to the Western Conference this time, unless you guys have any final thoughts on the Real Salt Lake first round matchup. Let's jump right into the wild card game tonight, which by the time you're listening, this may have already been finished up. So don't blame us for a wrong prediction here. We're predicting this at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, so still several hours before that game. Vancouver hosting Portland in Portland. Manny, I'll start with you.
I mean, it's got to be Portland. This is just not. I don't think mentally Vancouver, given how they played the last month, given this scenario, I think it's 4-0 Portland.
John?
Yeah, I don't know what else to predict for Vancouver. Like, they lose every game they play in abject fashion, and I assume they'll forget their jerseys or something for this game because everything that could go wrong for the Whitecaps goes wrong right now. So they'll lose and then pull the franchise. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know what'll happen.
5 losses in their last 7 matches.
Yeah.
Does Vanni Sartini make it out of the game without a red card? I don't even know if he's
No.
available. I don't think he's
He's
available.
got a yellow. The game doesn't start for 12 more hours. He's already on a yellow tonight. I don't know how it's possible, but it's true.
I'm already maybe just as excited to watch him as the game tonight, to be honest.
I know. They should have an isolation cam on Vanni Sartini tonight.
That's just what I was going to say, because you mentioned, John, at the stadium that there's a Messi, that there should be that there feels like there's a Messi cam. There should be a Vanni Sartini cam
absolutely
during Vancouver.
100%.
All right, so Portland going through on that one. We'll get to them a little bit later on. LA Galaxy, Colorado, LA hosting the first game of that series. John, I'll start with you then, Manny.
I think that Colorado has just not been playing well, so I think the Galaxy.
They've got injuries mounting up too.
Yeah, Colorado feels like they really had a good first part of the season, and it just sort of tailed off. And they're happy they made the playoffs. They're happy to get back to the postseason, but it feels like that's kind of where they're at. They're sort of all they are is happy to get back to the postseason.
Manny,
are we talking about the series or the first game?
We're going first game here because we'll come back and we'll talk about the next game.
All right, then just to make it interesting, I'll have Colorado sneak in the shootout win.
I like it.
Shootout win.
All right, LAFC then hosting Portland because of your predictions from the wild card game. LAFC hosting Portland on Sunday night. Manny,
LAFC.
John,
yeah, and it'll be like 7-4. Just something absurd like that. Buongo will score 5 goals. Somehow Portland will get 4, and it'll just be a total. Did you see that Phil Neville said that God is a Portland Timbers fan because that's why his team gets the host? And as somebody said online, I wish I remembered who this was so I could name check them, but they said, no wonder everything's going so poorly if God is a Portland Timbers fan.
We'll wrap up the predictions in the show. Seattle hosting Houston in the first round, the first game of that first round series. John, then Manny.
You know, it's funny. Houston is pretty good, and they got Hector Herrera back last week, and so they're a little less injured than they were. But I feel like me and everybody else is just sort of glossing over the Houston Dynamo's role in this series. So because as a mea culpa, I'm gonna say Houston wins this one.
Houston have an incredible away record this year, 8-7-2 away from Houston. So that one isn't as cut and dry as many probably are predicting it would be.
Including me. I keep forgetting that Seattle hasn't already qualified for the semifinals.
Manny?
I'm going to go Houston shootout win this first game. I think, they do what they do really well on the road is they keep the ball. They don't create a lot of chances, but they're great at possession. And I'm sure Seattle will want to get on the front foot at home, but I think Houston's going to sneak a draw, and then we've got our veteran goalie in Houston who will sneak a great shootout.
We know he's played in Seattle plenty of times.
If you're going to go veteran goalies, then you have to pick Seattle because Stephen Fry has been there since 1999.
Well, it's Stephen Fry versus Steve
my brain
Clark
doesn't
again.
think about shootouts with him. I don't know why. I just think about championships with him. So that's a credit.
Because he's 49 years old. That's why. And you go, well, that guy's not gonna dive to try to reach the corners of the net. He's just gonna stand in the middle.
Steve Clark isn't much younger.
It's true. Who is?
No, they're both old.
This is when we look and I find out that Stephen Fry is somehow 32 years old or something like that.
By the way, so we got Berkey, Fry, Clark. There's a couple more, right? God, so there's a lot of old goalies in the league right now.
Yeah.
It's an old position.
Yeah, it definitely
that's
is.
true. It's not one that you generally see the guys like Dane St. Clair playing when they're young and just staying in that position.
Oh, Melia was the one I was thinking of. Melia.
Oh, yeah.
Brad Guzan, he looks like he's 112, so.
It's going to be a weird day in Major League Soccer when all those guys retire and we're looking at the goalkeeper situation like, who are these guys? It's going to be like the NFL when Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Ben Roethlisberger all decided to retire and leave. It's like, wait, who are these quarterbacks now? We don't know any of these guys anymore.
I feel like we've already reached that every time you ask Manny about the U.S. men's national team goalkeeper situation where you're like, wait a second, everybody who's eligible is either 39 or 19. There's nobody in between.
And nobody's getting real minutes in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. All right, good stuff from you guys. Appreciate it. A busy show here on John's podcast. Ready to come back next week and break down a round one game coming up next week. That first game, October 29th, 8 p.m. Minnesota at Real Salt Lake. Looking forward to broadcasting that on 1500 ESPN live from Utah. Looking forward to it. And we'll talk to you guys right back here on your podcast feed. And thanks to the production staff of Grace Dearson, Evan Hentler, and Kyle Hayward putting us on every week. We'll talk to you next week, Loons fans.